Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the second shelf and to another Friday Reads. But before we start, two public service announcements. First of all, especially for Julie, look at my nails. They fit with the sweater. I hope that pleases you. Anyway, and the second one is for the Booktube Prize. You all know we finalized the Booktube Prize beginning of October, announcing this year's winners in both categories, fiction and nonfiction. I will leave link to the channel and everything down below, but that also means after the prize is before the prize. So in January, we will start with the Booktube Prize 2022, and Robert wants to add a new division, translated fiction, but that means we need more judges. So if you haven't signed up and if you are at all involved in the Booktube community, which you are because you're watching this video, please sign up to be a judge. You can judge any category, but you can. We are specifically looking for nonfiction judges, people who would want to judge nonfiction. You don't have to commit for the whole shebang, every round. But if you want to read 6 books, once, twice, or 3 times, please use the form that I will leave in the description and sign up as a judge. Anyway, so after the public service announcements, let's get into the Friday Reads. And there are 2 books that I finished between my last Friday Reads, which was 2 weeks ago, and today, and that is Catherine Ann Porter's short story collection, Pale Horse, Pale Rider. But I talked about that book and the other one that I finished, which was, I even have to look that up. Oh yeah, Lady Audley's Secret by Mary Elizabeth Braddon, which I read for Victober, and the prompt sensational novel. Victorian novel, but I talked about both of those extensively in my tops and flops, which I uploaded last Friday instead of the Friday Read. So I will leave a link to the tops and flops down below if you haven't watched it yet and are interested. A lot of introduction. Where are we? 2.5 minutes of introduction. But I did actually also finish some books that I can talk to you about. And even though we are already in the first week, end of the first week almost, for Nonfiction November, of course, the books that I finished are October books, and that means also Victober. Yes, and I finished this chunker, 900 pages, George Eliot's Daniel Deronda, which was first published in 1876, and it's her only novel that she actually set in what we call now the Victorian era. I don't think that they called it the Victorian era back then. But I was buddy reading this with Heidi from my reading life, and as a project for myself, as you know, that I had planned to read all of George Eliot's fiction in 2021, and I have 2 more left, and there are 2 months left, so I hope that I will be able to do it. It's Mill on the Floss and Felix Holt the Radical. Felix. But Daniel Deronda. So this book is obviously about a character called Daniel Deronda, but it is also about a female character called Gwendolen. So Gwendolen actually, I think, gets even more pages than Daniel Deronda, but Daniel Deronda is kind of the person where all the other persons that are mentioned in the book connect with. So he is at the center, even though there are long passages that he is not mentioned. The book, like I said, is set in 1876, and Daniel Deronda is an orphan, and he grows up with a rich ward, a guardian, Sir Hugo, and he meets, the book opens when Gwendolen and Daniel Deronda meet for the first time in a casino in German Leubronn, which is a made-up city. And then we get the background of both characters, and they meet and at occasions, but it's not, don't get me wrong, the development of the romance between the two. It's just that these are the 2 main characters, and Daniel will also meet other people, a Jewish young woman whom he encounters. I don't want to spoil anything for people who haven't read Daniel Deronda. And it's more or less a quite straightforward coming to terms with your identity, with your place in life, with your relationships, with your background, with religion. And I definitely enjoyed the book. It was at times, especially in the middle, I thought a little bit, yeah, put words in and put chapters in that I didn't feel were absolutely necessary. But that's the Victorian style. We get long expositions and contemplations also by the narrator and the author. I didn't love it as much as Middlemarch, especially because I felt in the end Daniel is a bit of a stick. There's not much humor in him. He's a very serious young man, and he's a good person, and he reflects a lot on what he does, and he is treating people well, but he is not very, as Heidi put it, I don't think I would want to hang with him. Well, me neither. He's not. Yeah. And in Middlemarch you had, not that Dorothea was the and certainly her husband were not the ha kind of people, but you had other characters that give the sort of, I don't want to say comic relief, but to give a little lightness to it. And this was in more than one sense, quite a heavy book. So I enjoyed it, but I didn't love it as much as I love Middlemarch. And another book I finished also in October, and I realized that I hadn't talked about it, is this one, Ann Petry, The Street, first published almost 100 years after Daniel Deronda in 1946. Well, 70 years after, but almost a century later. And Petry was a Black American author. This was her debut novel, which completely blew me away because I really loved the book. I read this for in real life book club, and all of the participants, and we are with the 6 of us, we all loved the book. It's set in the 1940s in Harlem, and we follow various characters, but the story centers around a young woman, Lutie, and her 8-year-old son. And Lutie tries to live the American dream, work hard, make something out of her life, get her son a better life than she has. The husband or former husband, father of the son, he's not really the taking care kind of person. So she has not that much contact with him and doesn't get any support. And then, of course, it doesn't all work out the way she hoped it would. Without giving spoilers, I would say it's not an uplifting, cheerful novel. It's quite bleak. It's about the racism she encounters, but also the sexism, the way men, black and white men, treat her and treat other women. But it's also about women who side with the guys, who try to get the guy and mistreat other women in order to keep him. And if that all sounds quite modern, that's why one of the reasons why I love this book so much, because I unfortunately felt that a lot of it could have just have been written today. I mean, of course, it's set in a certain time, and Petry does a perfect job in doing that, and also give us a very strong sense of setting, time-wise and place-wise. But a lot of the issues with racism and sexism and how people of various races and genders treat each other, not much has changed in those, 60 years since then, or 70 years since then. So I thought it was a brilliant book. It was, by the way, Google told me it was one of the first books, or the first book by a black American writer, female writer, who was a bestseller because it sold millions, and rightfully so. If you haven't read it, I can highly, highly recommend this one. Well, there's no category books that I'm still reading. There are one or two. I mentioned earlier Deborah Levy's third installment in her autobiography, Real Estate, and that I'm taking it slow, so I'm not, talking extensively about this book. But for the rest, I started November with a pretty clean slate, so that I could focus on nonfiction November. And the first book that I started, or one of the first books that I started, was for the prompt collection. And you remember I'm tweaking all the prompts just so that they fit the books that I want to read. So it's not really important. It's a buddy read with Heidi from My Reading Life, and a nature book by Rachel Carson, Under the Sea Wind, which was published in the 1940s as well, around the same time as the book I just talked about, The Street, which is sometimes, because this is such a different book. It's a nonfiction book, first of all, and then it talks about animals and the life of animals. We are 1/3 in, had our first check-in last Wednesday, and I really love this book. It's Rachel Carson's first book. Rachel Carson, I should say, was a marine biologist in the first half of the 20th century. She died pretty young, when she was only in her 60s. And this is the first collection. And she writes about creatures, animals who live in and around the sea. And the first half is about birds. And it's a full year cycle about migrating birds, sanderlings in particular. And what she does is she writes from the point of view of the bird. So the bird is humanized in a way because the bird is afraid, or the bird, but not too much. And I got a lot of information, but it's just delightful. The book is just absolutely delightful so far. And it's my first Rachel Carson, even though she is one of the modern classic of nature writing. But I think if it hadn't been for Heidi, I probably would have never heard of Rachel Carson. So I'm so glad we picked this book up, and I can't wait to continue. Next check-in is on Sunday, and I'm sure the second part will just be as delightful as the first part was. I have difficulty with the S and the sh today. I don't know why that is. You have to forgive me for that. And even though it is nonfiction November, I'm still reading some fiction. And one of the fiction books that I will be reading, or started, is a buddy read with Kim from Middle of the Book March, and that is Margaret George, Helen of Troy, which is obviously the fictionalized account of the life of a fiction figure, Helen of Troy, a mythical woman. I mean, you know who Helen of Troy is. The book was published in 2006. It's quite a chunker. I'm interested in all things Greek mythology, always have been as a child. There were two, mythology areas that I was really into, and that was Greece and Egypt. Rome, not so much, for some reason. I don't know. I can't tell you why, but I was a Greek and an Egypt fan since I can remember. So I have been meaning to read this book for a long time. I was a little bit hesitant because I only read Margaret George is a well-known biographer of especially ancient, also historical figure. And I read a biography of Nero and his young years. So the youth of Nero, a Roman Roman emperor. I think at that time together with Mel from Mel's Bookland Adventure, if I'm not mistaken. And I just didn't like it that much. So But I'm, like I said, really interested in Helen. And I have just started. I have just read the first couple of pages. So it's, I mean, the first 20 or something. I will read 20 chapters until tonight or tomorrow, because we have a check-in. And I will probably be able to tell you more next week whether I like it at all. But I'm definitely looking forward to giving it a try. So those were my read books and started books. I forgot, by the way, by the public service announcements, that I will keep the voting from last week, Sunday, which book should I, from my bucket list, should I read this year, open until Sunday, I guess, because I promised that I will read one book in November, so I should get going at some point. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you very much for watching. As always, I'm looking forward to your comments, and I'll see you all soon in the next one.